Wow, I am so excited today to welcome Gina Stinson. Gina and I met at a worship event locally here. I am in Georgia and she's in Texas, but we met and I was so inspired by all of her ministry and all of the things that she does. She is a pastor's wife and she is a writer. And so today we are going to look at the power of words, words with ourselves, words with others, words with our spouse, our kids, you know, and the power that they have to move us forward in a direction that we want to go or yank us back into a place that we don't want to be. So I hope that you will stay with us the entire time today and listen to this podcast. Welcome, Gina. So glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, so we've waited a little while for this. It was just a few months ago, or a couple months ago, that we did that worship event. And today, what we're going to start with is because we're talking about the extraordinary marriage, right?
Right?
And everybody has something that's extraordinary in their marriage. Sometimes people hear me say, "Oh, I'm the host of the extraordinary marriage," and what I hear from them is, "Oh, so you have an extraordinary marriage, do you?" And of course, I do think so. But I think we all either look towards the positive or we get hung up on negatives. And some people have a more tendency to do that than others. But as we get started today, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family. And like I said, you're a writer.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Georgia, spent most of my childhood there, and left and went to Springfield, Missouri, and went to Bible college. And there I met my husband, Bruce. And we have been in Texas for the better part of 32 years, married and in ministry. And we have two young adult children.
I still
and
call children.
and they are 22 and 18, and they keep life still interesting. They're both still at home, going to college, working their jobs. And anyway, we have been in Southeast Texas for about 7 years now, 6.5, 7 years, and at a church serving the Lord. And just I do feel like I've had an extraordinary marriage and life. We've had adventure after adventure and a lot of trusting God through good and bad times. And so I don't regret a minute of it. It's been great. So,
Well, when we're talking about marriage, um, what makes your marriage extraordinary?
well, I think probably, probably first of all, that, and this might seem very shallow, but humor, I think, has helped make our marriage extraordinary. My husband is very funny, and he likes to have a good time, and he likes to be busy. And I am pretty much the exact opposite of that. And so he keeps things lively and, always wanted to go do something and, you know, and have fun. And that's been great for our marriage, and it's been also good for our parenting because it has definitely provided balance in our house. So I would say good humor has given us extraordinary marriage. I think of course, first of all, would be that Jesus Christ is the center. And even though we fail in that, he never fails. And so we have the beauty of a relationship with him independently and together. And I think that that makes for an extraordinary marriage on its own with nothing else added. And so I appreciate that in our marriage. And I think that we have done life together, a lot of life together. I feel equally called into ministry, and so we spend lots of time together planning and talking and about eternal things. And I think that has been a beautiful gift that we have in our marriage, is that a lot of the focus is on eternity and beyond today. And I think that, when your focus is, when you try to make that your focus, I'm not saying we're flawless, but when you try to make that your focus, a lot of the trivial things that we argue about in our marriage, are put into perspective in the light of eternity too. So
Well, I think that humor It's a very important thing
Yeah.
and not
Yes.
frivolous at all.
Uh,
It's a very important thing. I was watching Joanna Gaines from, remember Chip and Joanna Gaines from HGTV?
yes.
I think a lot of people watch that and love that. I think I love that show because it's creating beautiful things and they always look like they're having a great time doing it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
we know who the crazy wild person is on that, and that's
Yeah.
Chip. In fact, I was watching some of the newer things. I'm like, oh, he is just going overboard sometimes. He's just crazy. But she's like the stabilizer. She's
Hmm.
the stabilizer. But guess what? I was watching her on Magnolia Table, I think or
Hmm.
Magnolia Network,
Right.
and she was cooking. And guess what? She's a little silly too. And I
Yeah.
think that for people that really enjoy humor, that the other person has to have a little bit of silliness too. You're really not the
Hmm.
opposite totally opposite, because the totally opposite would be like bugged by it,
Right.
bugged
Right.
by humor. I teach the behavior styles, and so the opposite person's bugged by it. So you guys are just a match made in heaven.
Yeah. Well, after 32 years, he has definitely rubbed off on me, and I see life through a little bit of a lighter lens, than I did probably when we first got married, and appreciate it a little bit more too. So,
And aren't you thankful for that? It's rough to
yeah.
be too serious.
Yes, exactly. Hmm.
Well, okay, so Gina, before we go on to talking about some of your writings and some of the things that you've done, um, so what's a rough time? I mean, we've all had some kind of really rough time. I know I've had a time where, and I'm not going to go into that, but a time where I really I didn't talk to God much even because it was such a hardship for me that I literally I still went to church, I still did all that stuff, still did all the things I usually did.
Right.
But when I was in my house, I was not a happy camper.
Hmm.
And I didn't go as far as like blaming God for it, but I kind of shut down. And it was a miserable, miserable time of
Right.
negativity within myself. But so we all have something. So can you think of a time? I mean, I know as a pastor's wives, you probably have to move around, or
Hmm.
sometimes there's somebody in the church that causes a challenge. And of course, you only talk about certain things. But what is the time you're thinking about?
Well, I hate to say this, but I would say there's been many times that I have allowed the conversation in my head
Mm,
to become much more loud than the conversation that I should be having with the Lord, or even with a faithful friend, or my husband. Um, I have definitely battled the wrong kind of words, feeding myself with a diet of unhealthy
mm,
conversation in my head, um, and I that is not something I'm proud of, but is something that God has begun to. He would have given me victory over this probably a long time ago, but I have just become, in the last probably 10 or 12 years, more conscious of what I was allowing to happen, and that negative self talk. Um, I remember sitting on my couch one time, and I was home alone, and I sat there for hours rehearsing in my head something negative that had happened, and instead of like um, quenching it with God's word, and allowing God's word to have victory in my head, I just sat there and thought and over processed that negative event over and over and over. And I remember looking down to see what time it was and realizing I had sat in that same spot for 3 hours.
whoa.
And I thought to myself, we, me, I have got to get victory over this. This is, I am wasting valuable time that God has given me. He has trusted me with my life. He has trusted me with minutes. He has trusted me with hours. And I have just given the enemy victory for
Mm,
3 hours in my head. And so I would say to people that, over process things and have a hard time moving on from hurtful situations, that don't sit in that, because God has something so much better. Victory is within the pages of His Word, and our thoughts. The Bible says that we're to hold captive our thoughts and not let them have free reign. A prisoner who's held captive doesn't get to run around even the prison yard free. I mean, he is supervised 100% of the time, and So I don't want to let those bad thoughts, those bad words, those bad conversations, those hurtful things that have happened, and we all have those things, but we have the option to go to God and give him those burdens. And so I encourage anybody that's struggling with that, do that quickly, run to that instead of sitting on the couch for 3 hours and in your negative thoughts that don't produce anything good. It was self-pity, and it was anger, and rage, and all the negative things, and that aren't the fruit of the spirit, for sure. And those things were not being produced in my mind at that time. So
Well, we were just talking before we started today that we, at this event that we did together, I was actually the worship music
mhm.
and she was actually the speaker. And we didn't really get a chance to talk that much, but I loved your message and what you talked about. And I felt a connection to you for some reason, but we didn't get to talk to each other really at all.
Right. Yes.
And until we just started today, we talked for a few minutes before we started. So you wouldn't realize this, but I too have had trouble with that. And nobody talks to me that way. Nobody talks to me that way, but I talk to me that way.
Exactly.
And I think it's a problem that a lot of women, and I know a few men that have that trouble. And the devil decides where he can get us.
Hmm.
It might be drinking, it might be drugs, it might be we don't want, I know this is the extraordinary marriage. We don't want to think about, stepping outside our marriage, but
Right.
it's like words, buying things, looking for satisfaction. But for me, often I used to say to my consultants, I was a director with Mary Kay Cosmetics, and I would say to my consultants, would you know how you think in your head, those thoughts, those negative things, those things that tear you down? Would you allow anyone else to talk to you that way?
Right.
Would you be best friends with the person who's
Mhm.
talking to you that way?
Right.
And I mean, every person's answer is no.
Right. Right.
But yet we do that. And so I would say, well, unfortunately, that is a place that, Satan gets to me.
Hmm.
And so I do really great and then I don't.
Right.
Really great and then I don't. And so it's a battle. It's not something that you just sometimes move past and it never happens again.
Right. Right.
But and so I think that's, today we're looking at at words and the power of words. And that is definitely the first place. So what a perfect story.
Mhm.
What a perfect story because what we battle in our heads, you know, uh, hurting people hurt others. And so when we're battling those things in our head, then we end up hurting the people around us
Right.
because we're using negative words, or at least we're sucking the positive air out of the
Right.
room, right?
Right. Well, and the Bible says that there is life and death are in the power of the tongue. And
Ugh.
so, even if you think about your own life, do you want to be breathing in life, or do you want to be breathing in death? That's the power that your words have, towards others too. But, even with yourself, and that self talk that goes on in our minds. So,
But the thing is, it's how do we get past it?
mhm.
I mean, have you found something that helps you get past that? I mean, I know you're looking at God's word, right?
Right. I think that focusing on what God says about a situation versus what my mind thinks about a situation is always the better way. I think that, even we see David in the Psalms, he would pour out his heart to God. And, he would cry and he would mourn. He's a great example of, telling God exactly how you feel, And I saw there is a place for that. And I definitely feel like, that should happen, and that we should go to God and we should say, hey, I'm hurt over this, or I'm not feeling secure right now, or I'm feeling angry about something. We should and can tell God those things, but it's what we do after we tell him that. And David says, create in me a clean heart. He says, okay, God, now change me, fix me. I want you to fix me. And I think that no, I know that the only way that we get victory over the self-talk that is not healthy is through God and his word, and his word changes us. And so I would say always going to him first, through prayer, unburdening your heart, your mind, and then go to him. To We have to retrain our brain, retrain our heart to desire what He wants for us. And He does not, like you said, He doesn't want us to be thinking bad thoughts. We wouldn't allow anybody else to talk to us that way.
Hmm.
Why would we talk to ourselves that way? And so, reminding ourselves who we are in Christ. I used to have a paper that said all the things that God says about me, and maybe do a study on what is the truth, what does God really say about me, and allow those things to start over rehearsing in our head, instead of the negative, and just retraining how we think about things. I think, also there, we have to think about, depending on what you're overthinking, sometimes we're offended by things. Sometimes we're dealing with unforgiveness, and sometimes things are our fault, and sometimes things are not our fault. Sometimes we
Hmm.
have no control over what has happened.
Hmm.
And so really kind of taking the time to think about, why am I feeling this way? Why am I talking to myself this way? What has happened that has kind of spurred this negative self-talk on? And sometimes we just like to kind of sit in our self-pity instead of moving on. And so I think that it's an important thing to realize, to take the time, pause, take the time to sit and ask God, what is going on? Why am I feeling this way? And how can I move past this? And sometimes that happens through confession and prayer and getting in His Word. And sometimes we need a little extra help. Sometimes we need a counselor to help us, and there's no shame in that. My mom has been a counselor for years, and she says everybody needs a good counselor every now and then. So having a counselor or a friend or a pastor or someone who you can talk to if you can't get over it, doing that, I think that's healthy and good for us.
Well, I think sometimes we just need somebody to talk to
Mm-hmm.
chat, to get it out, get that,
Sure.
make sure whoever you're talking to has, if they give you advice, sometimes it's just you need somebody to listen
Mm-hmm.
and encourage or whatever. But
Yeah.
I was just thinking that whenever I'm having a lot of trouble, I have realized that a lot of times I am extremely tired,
Mm.
and I won't let myself stop, or I won't
Right.
take that pause, or I just don't stop. And so I need to recognize that I'm tired and exhausted, and so negativity has set in, and I'm really a more
Right.
positive person. So, all right, so I'm going to share this as we move on through this, because this is really important. This is in Galatians 5:22 through 23, and it's something that, like, you see this on plaques, you see it on walls, you see it everywhere, because it's the truth. And these are the things that we want to focus on. And are our words fitting into this? But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithful, gentleness, and self control. Against such things, there is no law. And if our words to ourselves and to others fit into that category, we're probably doing okay, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yes, nobody gets mad when you say, when you're too peaceful or too joyful or too loving. No one gets upset about those things.
That's exactly right. Okay, so let's look at parents, because being a part of the extraordinary marriage, uh, you know, really it goes back to our parents and how we were raised, and we bring a lot of that kind of baggage and that stuff into marriage. But at the same time, we're all responsible for how we present ourselves in our marriage. So I often say it's important that people recognize when they're having problems, and then they figure out how to resolve it, so then they can reset. We don't have to stay in that place if we've had hardships in our past.
Right.
But so words between parents, let's just take a quick little thing about how those words between parents, how to have conversations with one another. And sometimes the kids can hear these things, but the words between parents and how kids pick up on those words.
Okay. So definitely, we want to build up in our marriages, and so I say, to build up, you have to keep the volume down.
That's true.
And I tend to be the hotter head in our household, and get
You are a
loud.
redhead.
Yeah, well, but get I get louder quicker, and have learned that many and most probably conversations need to be handled privately, and that is not that's not like over sheltering our children, but it is sometimes protecting them, because there's things that mom and dad need to talk about that don't need to be talked about in front of our kids. And I'll say
Hmm.
this, in a society, a world that information is at our fingertips, our kids are exposed to so many things at a younger age than you and I were exposed to them. And so um, protecting them from some of the harsh realities of the world is doing them a kindness. It's not being overprotective or helicoptering or anything like that. It is taking our position as parents, as the leaders in the household. It's taking that job very seriously. And there's just some
Hmm.
things, that Bruce and I don't talk about in front of our kids, even at their ages now. I will say there's less of those conversations, because as they're adults, they need to see, how does a healthy, how do we work through conflict, or how do we work through a disagreement or a serious situation. It doesn't even have to be a disagreement, just something that's more serious. How do we work through that? How do we make a decision? And that, hopefully, they will have learned from our good as well as our bad, as they
That's
go,
right.
on into their, adult lives, and, marriage one day. So I think keeping the volume down, uh, trying to get a level head before you accuse. We don't have to accuse. I think asking questions before when we have a conversation, instead of thinking you have it all figured out, and you know exactly what the other person's motives were and all that other kind of stuff. I
Good
think,
advice.
asking questions. Jesus was a question asker in the Bible. 300 and something times he asked questions, and so I think that's a big example to us in relationships. Is before you go and accuse, go and say, what did you mean by this? Or, I heard this happened. Can you give me your version? And ask questions versus, I know what you did and I know what you said. And, why did you do this? That kind of thing. And so I think, keeping the volume down, asking questions. I think, to think, uh, as, as parents, we have to realize everything's not an emergency. Everything that we feel a lot of pressure to, as parents, to make decisions and quick decisions, but everything is not an emergency. And sometimes just slowing down, taking a deep breath, pausing a little bit, saying, we're going to make this decision tomorrow. We're not going to make this decision tonight, because if we make it tonight, it's going to be made. We're angry, or we're
Mm.
tired, like you said. We
Yeah.
don't do well when we're tired. So saying, you know what, this isn't a decision that has to be made tonight at 10:30 when you found out, about it. This could be made tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and we can, when I've had a good night's sleep, or when I've had time to think and pray about it. So pausing, I think, is healthy in our communication. And I think that when we pause, we do us a favor and we do our spouse a favor. We say, okay, we're going to give them time to think about what's going on too. This is, it's a kindness that we can give them. So, I also think, as a teacher, through the years with children, when you have to talk to a parent about a child's behavior, you use the
Mm.
sandwich method. You do one good thing, one negative thing, one good thing. And so I
Yes.
think sometimes we can use that in our marriages too. We can compliment, and then we can say, but I do need help in this area, or I do need, I need your assistance, or we need to make a decision about this, or the plumbing's backed up, whatever the negative is. We can kind of sandwich that between good, because sometimes we can overthink all the bad things that are happening in our marriages.
Get
And
stuck in our head.
we put the good things at such a low priority. And so, again, doing the sandwich method makes me think, okay, I got to think of two good things before I address the one negative. Think of two good things before I think of a negative. So,
And that's good, purposeful thoughts. You like purposely practice that. Whatever we
right,
practice, we get better at. Okay,
right,
so it makes me think, as we finish the parent thing, is like, it makes me think of words, like we give good words to our kids and we encourage them
Mhm.
and we help them become confident and that kind of thing. And then I can remember something that my son told me when he grew up, and it was this. I bet somebody else relates to this. It's like as a mom, sometimes you get like, I have had it up to here. I am tired. I'm stressed. Right. And they were like, I don't know about you, but I went on strike a couple times. I remember going on
Yeah,
strike,
I
and I
hear that.
remember, I remember saying, "I am living," and I didn't mean that. I was
Right,
just so
right.
frustrated. I
Yeah,
had to just spout something that was stupid,
right,
right? And
right.
as my youngest son grew up, he goes, Mom, whenever you would say that, I would be worried that you're going to actually leave. And I'm like,
Oh no.
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry
Yeah,
because there was not really any intent. But
right.
I just that's the power of words, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah, and our words really should be healing,
Mm.
and an intentional and meaningful I'm sorry, goes a long way, and so our healing words are important.
Okay, so we'll have to go back onto that. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes there's people, I mean, like, I want everybody to think about this. Is this you? Is this
Uh-huh.
your spouse? Is this your
Right,
kid? It's
right.
like some of us easily say, I am so sorry. And in fact, I would said to my husband the other day, I said, we say I'm sorry too often. I'm like, you
Mhm.
don't need to be sorry about that. But
Right.
it's like we kind of got that habit, and we
Hmm.
always, if we step over or we do something or whatever, I'm like, I'm so
Right.
sorry.
Yeah.
But there's people who just in their stubbornness, it's like ingrained in them, it's their DNA,
Hmm.
it's deep
Right.
within them, and they're not
Right.
able to say I'm sorry. And that causes conflict and
Hmm.
hurt, I think, in marriages.
Right. I agree. And there, on the flip side of that is there's people that, like you're saying, you know, say I'm sorry for everything, and they don't, and I'm not saying this in your case, but don't mean it ever. They just say
Uh,
it to get them off the hook,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's as bad as anything. And so I think there's other ways that we can say I'm sorry to prove that we're sorry, and that is, what can I do to change? What can I do to help this situation? And that shows the other person I'm not just saying I'm sorry. I am sorry, but I don't want this to stay the same. What can I do? What would you like to see? What outcome
Mm,
would you like to see happen the next time that I'm faced with this situation? Because then you're putting action, and it's involved. You're evoking a conversation that's involving the person that was offended. And say, okay, the next time this happens, I would like you to do this, and you're able to communicate your expectation for the next time. It doesn't fix that something maybe negative happened this
mm.
time, but it shows the other spouse, okay, I mean business. I don't want this to happen. I truly am sorry. I will do better. I'm going to try to do better next time, but I'm going to know your expectation. This is what I want to see happen versus what happened, today.
Because really, truly hurtful words. Sometimes we just reach out because we're so frustrated
Mm-hmm.
and we use hurtful words and they can't be put back in the
Right.
box.
Right.
Once you've said something really terrible to your spouse,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I talk a lot in different areas, and this is just universal, and it's always
Mm-hmm.
literally there are deposits and there's withdrawals. And just like your bank account, and you make a couple of deposits or a few deposits each month so that you can pay your bills. If
Mm-hmm.
you didn't make those deposits, there's no money in that account to pay your bills.
Right.
And your words account, or like I like to call it your love account, but your
Mm-hmm.
words account would be the same thing, encouraging words. And that goes even for not only for your spouse, but for your children. If you are using deposits, you're using encouraging words, things that empower, things that lift. Or if you find yourself always using words of criticism and putting them down, or they're not enough, or you got that wrong, or whatever that would be.
Mm-hmm.
And so think of it as whether it's a money bank, a
Right.
love bank,
Mm-hmm.
or a word bank.
Right.
You got to make those positive deposits, and we're all going to make a few withdrawals because we're
Right.
human
Right.
and we're not perfect, but
Absolutely.
we got to make more deposits than we do
Mhm.
withdrawals.
Right. Right. Well, and the Bible talks about let your speech be always with grace. seasoned with salt,
Mm.
and so, those deposits of grace that we're making, on a daily basis certainly help cover some of our sin on other days when we're not on our A game and we're not living by the Spirit, And like you said, we're not going to do it perfectly every day, but if we've made those grace deposits, those deposits like what you're talking about, then those withdrawals when we goof up, are less costly, and able to, the other person can usually see, okay, they're just having a bad day, they're able to see that. So
Especially after you've been married a long time. I think, how long did you say you've been married?
32 years.
Yeah, I got 45 in. And you're like, how does that happen?
I know it's flown by.
I'm
Yeah.
only 45, and how can I
Right.
have 45 years of marriage?
Yes. Exactly.
Another thing I've really found whenever it comes to words is that, there's those languages where the tone of voice either means this or that. Well, in our language too, tone of voice means I'm welcoming your opinion, or I care about you, or I'm getting ready to fill you full of not nice words, or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
And so I remember saying to my kids, anytime I always wanted them to be able to be open and talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the husband too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
tone of voice. And but I would say to my kids, you can say anything you need to say to me, but you got to check your tone of voice. And even with grandkids to this point, they might say something. I have a couple that are a little headstrong,
Right.
and I'm like, now, how could you? Now, what is a nicer way that you could say that? But in relationships, as far as marriage, like we've always been very easy and very compatible, but then sometimes there's hardships and you both get a little stiffy, I call it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and there's that tone of voice. And I've found that I'm pretty easygoing, and
Mm-hmm.
my husband's easygoing. But if he starts to raise his voice with me, then there goes my shoulders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to raise my voice too. So I have realized that if I was married to somebody who got angry easy and had that bad tone of voice
Mm-hmm.
all the time,
Right.
my marriage would not be the same as it is now.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. Tone of voice has a lot to do with just the temperature in your house and everything. I agree. And I say sometimes I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'll say
Put
that.
that up front.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pick a fight, or I'll ask, are we trying to fight? And kind of add a little, a little check there. That if the tone does not match, that there is sometimes an urgency. If the house is on fire, of course you're going to be screaming. You get out of the house, get out of the
Yeah.
house. But in our everyday uh, conversations with our spouse, just showing mutual respect, I think is just, and that's
Hmm.
respect for, if I know that Bruce has been at the church all day and he has been in meeting after meeting after meeting, I need to have a very low expectation for what's going to happen at home that night because he is spent. And the same way with me, if I've had a bad day in the classroom or it's been a crazy week, a field trip or whatever has been thrown in there, then if the expectation on me is less to have to make decisions or less to have to answer questions or less, just that mutual respect, then the tone in the house, if I'm being aware and I'm loving my spouse with the love that is paying attention, okay, because a lot of times we're just not paying attention. We're not, what do they call it, not reading the room,
True.
well. And so, and then that gets us in trouble. And so if I can start thinking, when I know we're going to all be at home, in the evening that night, and I think, okay, what happened in everybody's day, and has everybody used up all their words? Because that there is a thing about that,
Yeah.
and so I think that the expectation, if we're paying attention, then we're going to have a tone, we're going to have a kindness about us, we're going to have a respect about us, that even if we have to have a conversation, maybe we can save the big conversations for later, or and maybe we can have a low key night at home, and create an atmosphere, because I'm big into like music and things like that, that create an atmosphere for things to be quiet and peaceful and things like that. And I think that's important for us to do. Even we think a lot about it with our kids, but even in our marriages, to keep the tone peaceful and quiet, and I think more thoughtful, just more thoughtful. We rush through so much of life. And I think so much of the sin that we bring into our marriages with, our tone or with our anger or whatever, our words is,
Selfishness.
yeah, is based because we are just rush, 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 rush. And we don't have time to just slow down and think about what we're saying and doing before we do it. We just, we're just in that race.
Absolutely. And I know for me, like I do recognize whenever I'm really tired
Mhm.
or stressed or spent.
Right.
And I do use my words. I'm very good at using my words usually. If I don't have any words, my husband is like, "Are you okay?" But I know that whenever I am spent, that I'm like, I just say it. I just say, you know what? I can't make that decision right now. I can't plan that. I can't think about that because, and that's just how it is. And
Right.
so then my husband has to find a time when I am good on it and not busy with something
Yeah.
else to have that chat. Well, Tina, I knew that we would hit it off. And that is the fun of doing this. It's like just meeting and having a chat and exchanging ideas. And I've so enjoyed talking with you.
Oh,
But
thank you.
you are a writer, so share with us because one of the things that really impressed me was a 21-day book that you had written for another event, and we were
Right.
just talking about that before, and
Hmm.
how it was spot on and so. I mean, it was ingenious. I thought it was so
Thank
great.
you. Thank
So,
you.
but you have several books that you've written. You want to tell us about that and tell us how people can get in touch with you and find you.
Okay. Well, I have written a book called Reclaimed, and it's a devotional book. It's the stories of rescued moments and days, and that I wrote the whole book entirely by myself. And it is just a collection of mostly from a humorous side, but definitely a lighthearted side of just moments that God reclaimed. The Bible says that what the enemy means for evil, God can turn for good. And I've definitely seen him do that in my life over and over, from the time that I was a child to present day. And so this is a very lighthearted book. Nightstand, type material, and so you can get that on Amazon. You can either Google my name or in the search bar, or you can look up the book Reclaimed, and it has a clock on the front of it. I have it. I'm gonna show this. I think it'll be backwards, maybe. I'm not sure, but if you can see it, and so that's on Amazon. You can get that, and then I have collaborated with several, well, probably 100 different authors on different books through the years. And Also, I write for Lifeway for their journal for women. It's called Journey, and I have this is the copy that will be coming out in December. And the great thing about this
Hmm.
is if you go and download Lifeway's women's app, you're going to be able to read that for free. And so I have 7 devotionals in this December issue, and I write for them 2 or 3 times a year. I write for them. That's a wonderful devotional that you can order to have delivered at your house, or you can read it for free on their app. So that's good. And then I was part of a group called Word Girls, and for several years, let's see, make sure I'm not doing this right.
Move it towards your face a
See,
little more.
okay, there we go.
On
Okay,
YouTube.
there you go. Yeah, and so I have several books in a series with Word Girls that I've collaborated with, and have this one's Snapshots of Hope and Heart, and it's a 12-week devotional. And then there's a couple of others in that same group of books that I've written in. So I also have stories in this book called, and if you're a mama boys, this is a great book. Let's see, get there. Life in the Estrogen Free Zone. If you have boys in your household, or you raised boys, or you have grandsons, this is a humor filled book of stories about the joys and the heartaches sometimes of, of raising boys, and it's a fun book. So that's a great book to give to a mom who's going to have a son. It's a fun book. So anyway, and then I've been part of several Christmas anthologies and things like that. So if you get on my website, it's ginastinson.com. And if you get on there, you can see some of the books that I've written in, and then you can also email me there if you you want to talk, or if you have questions about any of the writings or want to purchase anything that you can't find readily online. But Amazon has most of these books that you can purchase. And anyway,
I
I've
love
been,
it.
yeah.
So you've been writing for a while.
Well, I won a writing competition when I was 16 years old. It was a homeschool writing competition, and I won $100
Woohoo!
for the first place story. And but I, from the time I was probably 12 or 13, kept a journal, and that is really where a lot of my writing has come from. Is just over the years journaling things that God was teaching me and stories and things I didn't want to forget. God has been so good to me. And in ministry, as a pastor and pastor's wife, um, a lot of times in our circles, we hear a lot of negative things that happen to pastors and sad things that happen in churches and things like that. And those things, I will say, a lot of those things have happened to us, but he has also been so faithful. And I wanted to start collecting the moments of goodness. And
Mhm.
that's been part of my journey, is to not live in the Pollyanna world, but to recognize that as bad as things have been, he has been more faithful. He has been better. And I would not want any other journey but than to walk with him. And so a lot of my writing is focused on encouragement. Um, I I want people to know that they don't have to wallow in the pit. In the book of Jonah, it says he pulled me out of the pit, and I definitely feel like that God has done that for me, and I want others to experience that freedom and the joy and just the peace that comes from that. And so that's where my writing kind of has its roots in. And then God has allowed a lot of funny moments to happen in my life, and so I like to share those and make people smile and laugh and enjoy seeing some of. I think that God is a fun God too. And so recognizing his love to see us happy, and his love to and just the fun things that he's allowed us to experience. So I that's interwoven there too. So anyway.
Well, and so that's why I knew that we would hit it off, because we both have the same message, and like my passion is for marriage and for couples and to help them understand the challenges and the frustrations
Right.
so they can overcome them.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that we'd hit it off because yours is about family and
Mm-hmm.
it all goes together. So
Yeah.
I thank everyone for listening today, and you can go to theextraordinarymarriage.com and you can find all the podcasts. You can find a free starter kit to help you kind of start figuring out things on your marriage. Um, and there's all kind of things there. So I thank everyone for listening. Thank you, Gina, for being with me.
Oh, thanks, Connie. It's been fun. Thank you.